Welcome to Blackspot, where we look at the story you've been told, and then we dig a little deeper into the mechanics of what's really going on. The war in Ukraine is often painted as a pretty straightforward story, right? But in this explainer, we're going to go way beyond the headlines. We're going to deconstruct the whole complex web of motivations, consequences, and the hidden realities of this conflict. Okay, let's dive in.
So here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this by looking at 6 key areas. We'll get into the real spark of the war, dig into what the major players actually want, and uncover some of the devastating and often unseen costs for the entire world.
We all think we know how this war started, but is that the full picture? Let's begin with the official story we've all heard a million times.
So, on February 24th, 2022, the world woke up to this. The reason given for the invasion, right from the horse's mouth, was to protect Russian speakers from a government that Russia, without much basis, called neo-Nazi. It was sold as a kind of necessary, though brutal, police action.
But if we pull back and look at the bigger timeline, you see something else. You see decades of tension building up. After the Cold War, NATO just kept expanding eastward. Now, the real flashpoint came in 2008, when NATO flat out said that Ukraine would become a member one day. For Russia, that was a massive red line, and it kicked off years of friction that led straight to that 2021 ultimatum, an ultimatum that was, of course, rejected.
To really get this alternative view, you have to understand a concept called structural realism. All it really says is that big, powerful countries are mostly just worried about their own security. It's not always about good guys and bad guys, but about a rational fear of your neighbor's power.
And this really lays out the two competing stories. On the one hand, you have the narrative of unprovoked aggression, all driven by one man. But on the other hand, you have this structural reality that suggests this was a predictable security crisis. Think about it. When a massive military alliance pushes right up to the borders of another major power, well, that power is almost guaranteed to feel threatened and push back. From this angle, the war wasn't a shock at all. It was a tragic but completely foreseeable outcome.
Okay, so if the cause of the war is more complicated, then what about Russia's real goals? That whole demilitarization line tells one story, but there might be a much deeper motivation hiding in plain sight. Now, the official narrative, the one backed up by Putin's own speeches, paints this picture of a Russia dreaming of its old empire, wanting to reclaim historical lands and rebuild a lost sphere of influence.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Some analysts argue the threat wasn't military at all, it was ideological. The argument is that the real danger to the Kremlin wasn't NATO missiles, it was the very existence of a successful, culturally similar democracy right on its doorstep. A free and prosperous Ukraine could become a powerful example for ordinary Russians, threatening the Kremlin's grip on power in a way no army ever could.
So while we debate Russia's motives, America's role has been portrayed as pretty simple, right? Ukraine's #1 staunchest ally. But if you actually follow the money, the numbers start to tell a much more complicated story. Just look at this chart for a second. That big bar, that's the $14 billion in aid from April 2024. A huge number. But then look at what's proposed for 2025 and 2026. It drops off a cliff down to just $400 million in direct military support. That's not a small change. The fire hose of money has slowed to a tiny trickle.
This shift has people like Ralph Goff, a former CIA official, arguing that the whole U.S. strategy has changed. The goal might not be a decisive Ukrainian victory anymore. Instead, it might be to manage a long, grinding stalemate, to weaken Russia over time, but at a really devastating cost to Ukraine itself.
And that strategy of a long, drawn-out conflict has really profound consequences. While these geopolitical games are being played, the human cost on the ground has just exploded into one of the worst crises since World War II. And here's the thing. Just as the need is greatest, the world's attention and its wallet is starting to look away.
The scale of this is just staggering. Over 8 million people have been forced to flee their homes. That's Europe's biggest refugee crisis in generations. And it's so easy to forget that every single one of those numbers is a life turned upside down, a family shattered, a future just gone.
To make this tragedy even worse, experts are now calling this the Great Aid Recession. While humanitarian needs are surging everywhere, international support is just plummeting. Funding is back to what it was in 2016. And that means aid agencies are having to make these impossible choices, like cutting food for people who are hungry just to save those who are literally starving.
This comparison from the Council on Foreign Relations just brings it all home, doesn't it? It's a stark, brutal reality check. The political will to deal with these massive crises is just evaporating. And the human cost of that? Well,
It's just immeasurable. And this collapse in aid, it's not just about money. It's really a symptom of a much bigger trend. We're often told that the world is completely united against this war. But the data shows a planet that is deeply and maybe even dangerously divided.
Take a look at this chart. It's actually stunning. It shows that countries actively opposing Russia only make up about 36% of the world's population. Meanwhile, almost 2/3 of all humanity lives in countries that are either neutral or, get this, are openly supportive of Russia. The whole idea of a united global front, it's basically a myth.
And this support isn't just talk. Russia has built up a whole global network to keep its war machine going. You've got military allies like North Korea and Iran supplying weapons. You have economic partners like India and Turkey acting as laundromat refineries. They buy sanctioned Russian oil, process it, and then sell it on the open market. The point is, Russia is far, far from being isolated.
And this global split goes deeper than just money and politics. To really understand how deep this division runs, we have to look at what happens when a simple symbolic call for peace is made and then flatly reject it.
You know, throughout the history of warfare, there have always been these small, powerful glimmers of hope. The most famous one, of course, is the Christmas truce of 1914, when soldiers just laid down their weapons to celebrate together. It was a brief reminder that even in the middle of a brutal conflict, a shared humanity can still exist.
Put in 2025, that shared humanity felt very far away. Russia's rejection of a holiday ceasefire, a move condemned by global figures like Pope Leo XIV, it carries a really grim significance. It sends a chilling message that this isn't just a war for territory, this is a total conflict, or even the idea of a temporary peace is seen as a weakness to be exploited.
So what's the bottom line here? What connects all these dots? The contradictions between the story we're told and the reality on the ground? Well, they aren't accidents. They actually form a pattern. The war's complicated beginnings get boiled down to a simple good versus evil story. America's support quietly shifts from ensuring victory to just managing a stalemate. The incredible human suffering is pushed to the side as aid dries up, and the world, which we're told is united, is actually fractured into competing camps. It really seems like controlling the narrative has become a primary weapon of war, where strategic goals just always seem to win out over humanitarian concerns.
And all of this leaves us with this final, tough question. It's a question without an easy answer, but it's one we absolutely have to ask if we want to understand the true mechanics of this war, and frankly, others like it. Thank you for joining us at Blackspot. If you want to keep questioning appearances, make sure to subscribe and like for more investigations.